welcome actress and director Judith Godrèche. We're here to talk about your new film, MeToo, Moi Aussi. And for those of you who have not seen Judith's film, it is a beautiful short film that played on opening night at the festival, right?
Yeah, the Un certain regard.
In the Certain Regard section.
Yeah.
And it's a testament, and a very poetic one, to the people who have, I'll say women, who have survived sexual misconduct or sexual assault, not just in the film industry. It's people from all over, right?
I have to say it's mostly people that are not in the film industry, and a lot of incest, basically. And
Oh,
I mean,
wow.
majority of these women and men were victims of incest, which
Oh, my goodness.
it was very surprising when I received all those testimonies and letters. It's almost as if I was discovering. It sort of, gave me a vision of the world and the country I live in that was very shocking.
So let's back up and explain to our listeners how you started this film. You have been on quite a journey yourself, having had a lifelong career as an actress from your childhood, really, from
Yeah.
as a teenager, beginning as a teenager, and then making a decision to call out your own sexual abuser
Yeah.
late, recently.
Yeah, exactly. It took me almost 35 years, to speak out, and it was a long journey. It's like a puzzle, I should say. I moved to America. I sort of ran away from, the French film industry and moved to America with my kids and started writing a TV show a few years ago that I ended up doing in France, produced by A24. And as I was writing it, I realized that, the story of this French woman going back to her country, an actress, could not be sincere and, honest if I wasn't telling some of my childhood in this industry, because I was a child actor. But yet I didn't want it to become like a Me Too show, and I was very worried about saying any names and naming anyone. So I did this show, and it went to the Deauville Film Festival, but I still kept, my sort of like, I had decided I would not name anyone. And then, life sort of played a game, like surprised me, like, life decided for me almost. Like I found myself in front of images of one of the director that abused me when I was 14, and I found images of him that were sent to me by a woman, and it was a documentary about a psychoanalyst, and this director was interviewed, and watching this man talk about me, like me as a 14-year-old girl, the way he was speaking about me was just something that, shocked me in sort of a, such a, like it's almost as if like everything I had repressed came back, and I suddenly could not handle it, like, and had to speak out.
So interesting. That's such a common experience that I've heard over and over and over from women as the Me Too movement has unfolded. Women who've come forward decades later, they say they heard someone say something. They heard Harvey Weinstein deny one more time, or E. Jean Carroll, who brought the lawsuit against Donald Trump. She just couldn't bear to hear him deny that he had raped her one more time. That's well more than 30 years ago. That's like 45 years ago, whatever that happened. And so it's so interesting how for many women, and you included, that there's just a tipping point where you just say, no more.
Yeah, and for me, it was really also the fact that you could see in these documentaries images of me in a movie as a child, I mean, as a very young woman, and it's, you don't really look at yourself or think of yourself with a lot of compassion, and when you repress things, there's also a feeling of guilt and shame when you're a victim. It's not something you want to be known for, or, you're not walking the streets of Los Angeles, like telling, I was a victim in my childhood, or, so but it's bizarre. Like there's a moment where something, life comes back knocking at your door. My daughter kept saying that my show, an icon of French cinema, was like a best friend who knows more about you than you do and comes and say, you can do this. Like, almost like the show. And it's true. It's really the story of this TV show that sort of decided. It's quite a crazy journey. And I recently discussed a little bit on emails with Anita Hill, who I was introduced to and saw the short film. She sent me something she just wrote about the Harvey Weinstein, because I was one of the women who spoke out in the New York Times. And it's quite interesting how, in a way there's, I think, a really beautiful, sorority and like strength that can come from all over the world. Like, if there's anything good about what we went through, it's that. It's like the power of knowing you're not alone.
I want to talk about the film, but I also want to talk about a particular moment that Americans might be less familiar with. Everyone in Europe knows that you spoke out at the Cesar Awards in February about the conspiracy of silence, let's say, in France against talking about sexual abuse. What made, and your speech was very beautiful and
Thank you.
Beautifully written and beautifully delivered and very powerful. What made you decide to do that?
I think it was more about like not doing it once I was asked. I didn't really want to do it, but what if I didn't do it? It was about being brave, and I think like there was something about, in a way, I thought that, if in a place like that where everyone's is so dressed up and looking at their best and, on a pedestal, like on a, it's such a mystifying place, right? If you're at the César, it means you're someone in the world. And I thought, to go there and just talk about what's going on in this society, in the French cinema industry, but also like just in, as a reflection of what's happening in France. And, I felt like, okay, let's just do that. Maybe I should be brave enough to do it. And I feel that, I've been trying to understand why somehow this speech touched a lot of women that are not from this industry at all. And I think that maybe it is because when you're on in such a glamorous place, in a place where people are admiring everyone that's there, and suddenly there's someone who has this privilege, who says something so, something that's not a privilege, something that's a pain, and something that, is very similar to everyone else's, like what they went through. I feel that maybe people can say, oh my God, if she says that in such a place, if she is able to tell her story where in a place where she should be the most like, smooth and glamorous and actress, have an actress like a star attitude. If this pain and this story has a place there, maybe mine has a place also in the light. Like, it's how do you bring reality to the light?
What's worth pointing out is that when you talk about something that's so far in the past, it's especially difficult because you feel like I survived it. I got past it. I have a life. And so I just think that it's especially hard to dredge that up and relive that, quite apart from the fact that people will then associate you with that thing when they see you for a long time to come. And that's not the totality of who you are, and it's not the totality of what you are and what your life means. But in the society that we live in, that's what'll happen. And that's what's going to happen. So, I think it's...
Of course. But also, we're talking about power here. And we're talking
right.
about saying something that goes against power, against what's being established, against omerta and immunity. And so basically you're exactly like the grain of the piece of sand that's going to, you could be the piece of sand, or one more piece of sand that's going to stop the system from going smoothly. So you're somehow, positioning yourself as an enemy, a potential enemy of the system. Like the system exists and is the way it is because it's working for a majority of people. Otherwise, it would be different. So, you know, it's also this. It's like, can I go that far and sort of like, you know, position myself in a place where I know I'm risking my, you know, I'm obviously risking my career. And then the question is like, you know, if women my age are not risking that, what will happen to the young women and young actresses? Like, you know, you have to sort of like, I guess, endorse some sort of responsibility. Yeah.
So let's talk about the film a little bit. It's a very beautiful film, as I said, and I guess it's almost like a performance. It's almost like some kind of dance in a way. So it's not like a narrative film, just for those of you who haven't seen it yet. It's more symbolic in it's a lot of women standing together and gesturing to one another. Maybe you'll describe it better than me. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean,
you should definitely see it because it should be seen rather than described.
Yeah.
But go ahead.
I mean, it's 1,000 of women and men who wrote me out of the 5,000 and came to Paris to occupy this avenue with me. This avenue of Paris that goes all the way to La Place de la Nation, which was a symbol, very symbolic for me. And you know, it's a huge number of people in this avenue, and the idea was like, how do you direct a movie without directing people as if they were actors? You know, how do you not impose emotions on their face? How do you not tell them what to be like? And how do you direct and use all the elements and the music and the sound and the image and dance and gesture without ever dominating who you're filming, and also without, you know, this sort of hierarchy in the crew where you feel like it's such a some sort of aristocracy even in the crew. Like everyone is on the same level, and we have a crew of incredible technicians and you know, people taking care of all these women and men, and basically I wanted to use, you know, gesture, music, and dance, which is kind of what I put in everything I direct. I don't think I could do a movie or a show that doesn't involve music and dance, and basically, you know, tell also with these gestures the things that children would do, like I'm cold, I'm scared, I can't speak, you know, and basically sort of go to the roots of gesture that we would as a child have done if we could, or that we may have done. And I wanted to use a young actress, which is Tess Barthélemy, who happens to be my daughter, and she also is a dancer, to navigate, you know, this crowd, and she's the only actress, and sort of impersonate youth, and also by her move, she sort of like takes in all these testimonies, all this abuse, and sort of like dance through it. And I was very inspired by the beginning of the piano, the Jane Campion movie. You know, the very beginning, it's she has an intelligence that's very yeah, and she has a way of really using the elements and anchoring them in some sort of raw truth. But but though she's always it's always poetic. But it never goes like into some sort of cheesy poetry. You know, she has this raw truth to her art, but yet you still feel like you're in some sort of world that maybe does not exist, even though it does. And for me, that's like, I like to use, you know, all these elements as a director, and, you know, the sound is really important. Yeah, Terrence Malick does that too.
I could see him being very much an inspiration. So would you like the film to be distributed? It's most definitely not a conventional film.
Yeah, it's not. But yeah, I would want it to be distributed, and I would want it to travel the world, and yeah, definitely. Mm-hmm. And I think that also because it's not, you know, like people, like testimonies, people facing cameras, and it's not like sort of, I mean, I hope it's universal, and I hope that somehow, you know, like, this is why cinema is so important, and this is why it's great to be here, is because even so a movie will not be called Moi Aussi. I think that's what, you know, movies are made for. It's to feel less lonely and maybe somehow feel that, recognize yourself in some ways in films. And even when they're dramatic, even when there's lots of despairs in it, you could get out of the movie theater and feel better. So I hope that's what this movie somehow does, like gives a feeling of a hand that reaches out to you.
It very much feels that way. I just wanted to clarify, you put out a call on Instagram?
No, it's after I spoke out and after the Cesar speech.
Yes.
A lot of people
Reached out to
texted
you?
me, DM'd me on Instagram, and I could not. It was just too much. Like I didn't know, and I was
Okay.
also worried because some of those messages seemed important, and I didn't know how to handle this. So I created an email address to get all these, and I answered. I tried, and obviously I'm not perfect, so I probably have missed, and I'm still answering to some of them, but I tried to answer to most and hopefully all of them. And I said to them, I will think of a project that is an homage to you guys.
So this is all voluntary people who showed up to do this film. I mean, it's pretty amazing.
I mean, it's pretty
really.
brave, and it's from them. They are the real heroes. They are it's a crazy the strength you need to have to find yourself in such a setting. I mean, when you have being a victim and you're surrounded by a crowd that you don't know, and the truth is that we could only control so much.
And they didn't know each other.
Absolutely not.
They only knew that they were all there for the same reason. So then the close of the film is, so your daughter's walking towards the camera, and then all of these 1,000 people start filing toward the camera as if to leave a stage or as if to leave the scene. And many of them are looking straight at the camera, and some of them are kind of just looking off, but you focus on their faces. And their whole stories in their faces, because some of them look defiant, and some of them look sad, and some of them look like they have no expression at all. But you can tell that every single one of them is a real person with a story. It's a kind of a crazy genius move to do as a director. Like, how did you think of that, and what did you tell everyone to do?
Nothing. I had a narrative sort of like, I wrote the script and had this whole vision about, the beginning, which you are inside someone's eyes. And I was thinking of the traumatic memory, what do you remember, the sounds and everything. So I had this whole sort of narrative storyline that I wrote and all these gestures, but basically I didn't want to impose. So what I did is that I said, if you want to, you can do this. If you don't want to, you don't have to, and you do whatever you want. And so it was the thing was like to not direct, to not instrumentalize them, to not use them on my, and it was important for me, obviously, that a crowd is not a word. A crowd is a thing made of people and of faces. And so I wanted as much as I could to make sure that every one of these person with faces would be on camera. And there are people who I blurred because I said, if you want to come and be blurred, if you want to come and show your back, like, it wasn't like if you come, you have to be in a close-up and filmed. And I guess everything I do and direct and write is sort of like in this sort of like vibe. I have a tendency to love to make sort of like something like sort of a reality that's grounded and some sort of surprising, like it's and I think, for me what was interesting is the rawness of this. It's like this shot is raw, it's a onesie, it's like a long shot, and after all this, sort of like you say, performance and all these feelings and emotion, and sort of then it's like in your face, it's there, these people are looking at you, they exist, there's no way around it except getting out of the theater or shutting the TV. And I think like you can't say you don't know anymore. It's like truth is sort of looking at you, staring at you, and the camera is theirs, which for me is important because the camera can be used as a dominant object, and for me the camera is something they took to, yeah.
They took control of. Yeah. Beautiful. So I don't think I could let you go without at least asking you. Harvey Weinstein's conviction was thrown out on appeal, and they're going to try him again. How did that make you feel when you heard that? And
I mean, first of all, I wondered how he had so much money to keep paying for lawyers. Like, it's, knowing how it works in America, and it's very different system, French system and American system. And I was like, wow, this is crazy that he can keep going. And like, it was a terrible news. It was extremely shocking and sort of like had a feeling of like walking backwards. But I think, this should not be used to sort of like, demotivate, if that's a word, any women, and I hope this is not going to be used against victim, and that he's still convicted in California.
well, yeah, he's not getting out of jail, but the idea of all of these women having to re-testify seems tough.
Yeah, it's an absolute nightmare. I can't even imagine, like, it's and that's when somehow people like him are winning. It's just what women are going through. Just that is like enough pain and hurt that it should not be allowed. Like, it's insane when you think about it. But it's hard, I think, for anyone to identify really with someone who has to. Listen, I may have to face my abusers. I don't know if one day there's, I can only imagine, I don't know how you have to be so brave to do this. It's terrible.
But you think he should be reconvicted, retried?
If he could stay in jail in California for the,
Yeah.
then I don't know. There's no reason why this should be it.
Yeah.
It's the problem is like, what if this is like a statement of like saying we've erased the guilt. He's not guilty. That's the problem. It's like there's a difference between saying, oh, we decided something went wrong, or this wasn't done the right way or whatever, but for women, it means like, are you saying he's not guilty? It's the symbolism, because, seeking for justice is such a long, 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 long journey.
Yeah.
And it's not a given. It's not a given.
For sure. Well, thank you, Judith, so much
Thank
for
you.
being here. It's especially great knowing that the history of Cannes has also been associated with some of the worst abuses, that you get to come back to this place with a film about justice and celebrating the survivors and telling your story. So really, thank you so much for
Thank
joining us.
you so much for having me.